You've been walking on eggshells for so long, you've forgotten what solid ground feels like. You keep giving the benefit of the doubt. You stay quiet to keep the peace. You let things slide, hoping they'll change, thinking maybe it's just a phase. But deep down, it's not. This isn't just someone having a bad day. This is a pattern, a slow erosion of your peace, your self-worth, your voice. And every time you let it go, a piece of you goes with it. But here's the truth. The moment you decide to honor your own boundaries without apology, the moment you choose calm over chaos, that's when toxic people lose access to you. Not because you raised your voice, but because you raised your standard. One decision, one shift, and everything changes. Most people don't even realize how much they're carrying until it shows up as exhaustion, frustration, or that tight feeling in your chest when you're around certain people. You try to be kind, you try to be understanding, you tell yourself they don't mean harm. But over time, the weight of dealing with someone who constantly drains you, someone who twists your words, pushes your limits, and never respects your space, it starts to chip away at your sense of self. And the hardest part, you think setting boundaries makes you the problem, but you're not broken. You're not overreacting. You're just finally waking up to what your peace is worth. And today, we're going to talk about that one decision that changes everything. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. And when you make it, something shifts, not just in how they show up, but in how you do. There's this moment in relationships, whether with a partner, a parent, a friend, where something feels off. It's not loud, it's not always dramatic, but it's there. You notice how your opinion gets brushed aside, how your feelings are minimized, how decisions are made without considering you, and you sit with it. You tell yourself maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe you're overthinking. So you stay quiet, thinking your silence will bring peace. You think that by not reacting, you're being the bigger person. But let's be honest, what you're really doing is hoping they'll notice your silence and change on their own. But silence isn't always strength. Sometimes silence is fear, fear of confrontation, fear of being labeled difficult, fear that if you speak up, they'll leave, or worse, they'll stay and still not hear you. And that hurts because respect isn't just about someone using kind words. Respect is how they treat you when they don't get their way. Respect shows up in how they respond when you set a limit, when you say no, when you share something that's hard for you. And when that respect is missing, being quiet doesn't bring it back. In fact, the longer you stay silent, the more you teach them how to treat you. You might not even realize it at first. It starts small. You let the joke expense slide. You ignore the dismissive tone. You shrug off the broken promise. But each time something in you pulls back a little, your trust, your safety, your voice, and slowly the relationship stops feeling like a place where you're safe to be yourself and starts feeling like a place where you're always bracing, always editing, always shrinking. This isn't about being aggressive or dramatic. This is about clarity. It's about saying with calm confidence, this doesn't feel okay to me. Not because you're trying to control the other person, but because you're taking responsibility for your own emotional well-being. Respect doesn't grow in silence. It grows in honesty, in consistency, in shared accountability. And if you're the only one carrying that weight, if you're the only one doing the work to keep the peace, then it's not peace. It's quiet control. So if you've been holding your tongue, waiting for things to change, I want to remind you your voice matters. Not because it's loud, but because it's yours. Because it comes from a place of self-awareness, of knowing what you need to feel safe, to feel valued, to feel seen. And the right people, the people who truly respect you, won't punish you for speaking your truth. They'll lean in. They'll listen. They'll grow. But that starts with you. Choosing to speak, not a fight, but to stand. Choosing honesty over comfort. Choosing clarity over confusion. And above all, choosing to believe that your need for respect isn't too much. It's the bare minimum. You've probably heard it before. Or maybe you've just felt it in the way they look at you, the way they sigh when you bring something up again. You're too sensitive. You're always overthinking. You just want to argue. And after a while, you start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you are asking for too much. Maybe your needs are just inconvenient. But here's the truth that gets buried beneath all that noise. You're not too much. You're asking to be heard. You're asking to be understood. And that's not a flaw, that's being human. The problem isn't the size of your emotions. It's the absence of presence on the other side. It's someone who listens to reply, not to understand. Someone who gets defensive instead of getting curious. You try to explain what hurt you, and they turn it into a debate. You try to talk about what you need, and suddenly it's about everything you've done wrong. So over time, you stop bringing things up. You water yourself down. You rehearse your words before you speak. You walk on eggshells to protect someone who never thought to protect your heart. That's not connection. That's survival. And still, you keep hoping. Hoping that maybe if you say it the right way or at the right time, they'll finally hear you. That if you shrink yourself enough, it'll somehow make room for both of you. But love doesn't work like that. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear so someone else can stay comfortable. It invites your full self to the table, messy feelings, big thoughts, honest needs, and all. When someone cares about you, they want to understand your world, even if it doesn't make perfect sense to them right away. They lean in. They listen without trying to fix or dismiss. They don't shame you for feeling deeply. They honor it. And if they can't do that, it doesn't mean you're the problem. It means they've reached the limits of their own emotional capacity. That's not your fault. And it's not your job to carry. You don't have to make yourself smaller to be loved. You don't have to apologize for needing clarity, reassurance, or emotional safety. Those are basic human needs, and the right person won't roll their eyes when you express them. They'll say, "Thanks for trusting me with that." Because when someone really sees you, your emotions don't feel like too much. They feel like truth. So the next time you hear that voice, whether it's theirs or the one that's started living in your own head telling you you're too much, take a breath. Come back to yourself. You are not a burden. You are not too complicated. You are not impossible to love. You just need someone who listens with the same care that you give. And until that person shows up, let you be the one who listens to your heart with kindness and courage. Because you're not asking for too much. You're asking to be met. And that's exactly what you deserve. There's a common misunderstanding that happens in relationships, especially when emotions start to run high. People see calm and they assume indifference. They see you stay composed when they're yelling or measured when things get tense, and they take that to mean you don't care, that you're weak, that you're not standing up for yourself. But what they're missing, what you might even be questioning, is that calm doesn't mean powerless. It means centered. It means controlled. It means you're choosing not to let someone else's chaos pull you out of your peace. There's a quiet strength in staying grounded when everything around you wants a reaction. And that's the real test, isn't it? Not whether you can shout louder or prove your point harder, but whether you can hold your boundary with clarity without letting someone else drag you into their storm. That doesn't mean you stay silent. It doesn't mean you let things slide. It means you speak clearly, firmly, without giving your power away. And that's hard, especially when someone's used to getting a rise out of you. Maybe they poke at your insecurities, twist your words, or push you just far enough to make you snap. And when you finally do, they point the finger and say, "See, you're the problem." That kind of dynamic keeps you stuck in cycles, trying to defend, explain, justify. But the moment you stop playing that game, when you stop chasing their approval or reaction, you shift the entire dynamic. You take your power back, not with noise, but with presence. Being calm is not passive. It's active. It's intentional. It's saying, "I see what's happening here, and I'm not going to let it define how I show up." You're not trying to win an argument. You're trying to protect your peace. That's a different goal. One is about ego. The other is about healing. Now, there will be people who don't like that version of you. The one who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't argue just to be heard. Because when you stop engaging the way they expect, they lose their grip. And for some, that loss of control feels threatening. But that's not yours to fix. Your responsibility is not to manage someone else's discomfort. It's to stay true to what you know is right for you. So if you've ever felt like your calm was misunderstood, like your choice to step back was seen as weakness, let me tell you right now, it's not. It's wisdom. It's self-respect. It's choosing clarity over chaos, maturity over mess. And it's not always easy. It takes practice. It takes reminding yourself that you don't have to show up loud to be strong. You don't have to fight to be heard when you already know your truth. Real strength is quiet. It's stable. It holds the line without needing to shout. And when you live from that place, toxic energy can't touch you. Not because it stopped trying, but because it lost its access. You stayed calm. You stayed grounded. And you stayed in your power. A lot of people get uncomfortable the moment you start talking about boundaries. They hear that word and immediately think you're trying to push them away, that you're building a wall, shutting them out, keeping them at a distance. But that's not what a healthy boundary is. A boundary isn't a punishment. It's not a cold shoulder. It's not a line drawn out of spite or anger. A real boundary is clarity. It's honesty about what you can give, what you can hold, and what you need in order to stay well within a relationship. Too often, we wait until we're completely overwhelmed to finally say enough. We stay silent to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to be seen as easygoing or loving. But love without boundaries eventually turns into resentment. Because when you give beyond your capacity, when you say yes out of guilt instead of desire, when you keep showing up in ways that leave you drained, you're not building connection. You're building a version of yourself that's constantly betraying your own needs. And that betrayal adds up. You start to feel invisible even when you're physically present. You begin to feel like no one really sees you. Not because they're malicious, but because you've trained them unintentionally to expect access without limit. And now when you finally start to draw the line, it feels jarring to them and maybe even to you. But it's not cruelty, it's correction. You're not pushing people out. You're inviting them into a more honest relationship with you and with what's actually sustainable. See, boundaries say, this is where I end and you begin. They honor both people. They help you show up without bitterness, without overload, and they create space for people to take responsibility for their own emotions instead of dumping them on you. That's not distance, that's dignity. And when someone really cares about you, they don't resist your boundaries. They respect them. They see the boundary as a map, not a wall. A map that shows them how to love you better, how to meet you where you really are, not where they assume you should be. But not everyone will respond that way. Some people will take your boundary personally. They'll say you've changed, that you're being selfish, that you're not as available as you used to be. And they're right, you have changed. You've grown. You've gotten clearer on what you can carry and what you can't. And you've realized that peace in a relationship isn't just about harmony on the surface, it's about alignment underneath. So if setting a boundary feels uncomfortable, that's okay. That's normal. It takes courage to let go of the version of you that kept everyone happy and hold on to the version of you that's finally being honest. But you don't have to explain it with a long speech. You don't have to apologize for it. You just have to stand in it with grace, with calm, with consistency. Because boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about letting the right ones in. The ones who can meet you with the same clarity, care, and respect that you're learning to give yourself. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical effort. It comes from constantly having to explain yourself. You find yourself repeating the same things, trying to say it a little softer, a little clearer, hoping this time they'll get it. You overthink your tone, your timing, your wording, because every conversation feels like you're walking through a minefield. You're not trying to win an argument. You're just trying to be understood. But the more you explain, the more twisted your words become in their hands. And eventually, you start to wonder if the issue is really you. It's not. You're not being misunderstood by accident. You're dealing with someone who is committed to not seeing you clearly. That kind of relationship isn't built on curiosity or care. It's built on control. Because when someone wants to misunderstand you, they're not listening to learn. They're listening to defend, to deflect, to protect their version of the story. They're invested in staying right, even if it costs the relationship. And you trying to explain yourself over and over again becomes less about connection and more about survival. You start to feel like if you could just say it the right way, they'd finally see your heart. But when someone's already decided who you are in their mind, no amount of explaining can reach them. They're not waiting to understand, they're waiting to discredit. And that's painful, especially when it's someone close to you. Someone you've cared about, invested in, maybe even sacrificed a part of yourself to keep the peace with. You want to believe they'll come around. That if you just keep trying, keep showing grace, they'll soften. But here's the hard truth: clarity is a two-way street. And if you're the only one trying to bridge the gap, it's not a relationship, it's a performance. At some point, you have to stop proving your intentions to people who've already made up their minds. You have to stop bleeding emotionally in front of someone who only sees a mess instead of a wound. And that doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start conserving. You protect your peace. You hold your truth without needing it to be accepted in order for it to be valid. Because when you're clear within yourself, you don't need everyone else to co-sign it. Letting go of the need to be understood by certain people is one of the most freeing decisions you'll ever make. It doesn't mean you shut down. It means you stop chasing conversations that only go in circles. You stop handing your self-worth over to someone who doesn't know how to handle it with care. And you start building relationships with people who don't need 1,000 explanations to believe you. Because they're listening with their heart, not just their ears. You deserve to be in spaces where your clarity is met with compassion, where your effort is matched, where your truth doesn't have to be diluted to be accepted. So take a breath, step back. You've said enough. The right people won't make you fight to be seen. They'll meet you where you are, and they'll make it safe to stay there. There comes a moment when you realize that no matter how much work you do on yourself, how much grace you give, how many deep breaths you take, how many chances you extend, the pain still keeps finding you in the same place. You show up softer, more patient, more self-aware, hoping this time will be different. You convince yourself that if you change enough, the space around you will somehow change too. But healing doesn't work that way. You can't heal in the same space that keeps hurting you. Not because you're not trying hard enough, but because safety is a requirement for growth, not a reward. You need room to breathe, to be seen, to be heard without being picked apart. But when every conversation turns into a conflict, when your honesty is turned into a weapon, when your boundaries are treated like insults, you start to close in on yourself. You second guess your feelings. You question your sanity. And slowly, what you thought was self-improvement turns into self-erasure. You're not healing. You're surviving. Sometimes the hardest thing to admit is that the place you've been trying to heal in is the very place that's keeping you broken. Not because it's always loud or abusive, but because it's inconsistent, confusing, unsafe. One moment you're seen, the next you're blamed. One day they're kind, the next you're walking on eggshells. That emotional instability doesn't just wear you out. It reshapes how you see yourself. You start to believe that peace is something you have to earn, that love is something you have to chase, that your needs are just too complicated to ever be met. But the truth is, you can't grow where your nervous system is always in defense mode. You can't rebuild your self-worth in a place that keeps tearing it down. Healing requires steady ground. It requires presence, patience, and protection. It doesn't mean the people in your life have to be perfect, but they do have to be safe. And if they can't be that, it's not your job to stay and keep trying to fix it. Sometimes healing starts with leaving, not to punish anyone, but to finally honor yourself. That decision is never easy, especially when there's history, especially when you still love them. But love without safety isn't enough. And it's okay to say, I need distance to get well. That's not giving up. That's choosing to stop hurting. That's choosing to give your healing a real chance, not just inside, but around you. Because when your environment changes, something inside you softens. You stop bracing for impact. You start trusting your voice again. You start remembering who you were before you felt like too much or not enough. So if you're in a space that keeps reopening the wound, I want you to hear this. It's not weakness to walk away. It's wisdom. You're not failing anyone by choosing peace. You're honoring your healing by giving it the conditions it needs to actually happen. You don't have to earn your worth by staying in pain. You are allowed to choose better, and you are allowed to start now. There's a specific kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from constantly trying to connect with someone who never really meets you halfway. You reach out, you initiate, you ask how they're doing, you check in, you make space for their emotions, their stories, their stress, and then you wait for them to ask about you, for them to notice you're not okay, for them to lean in the way you always do. But it doesn't come. And when it does, it feels forced, like a checkbox they're ticking off. That's not a one-off, that's a pattern. When a conversation always feels one-sided, it's not just poor communication, it's emotional imbalance. It's someone who's gotten used to being poured into without pouring back. And because you care, because you're built to hold space and offer support, you keep doing the work of two people. You keep telling yourself they're busy or tired or not great with words. You keep lowering the bar, hoping they'll meet you there. But here's the thing, healthy relationships don't run on excuses. They run on effort. And when effort only flows one way, the connection eventually runs dry. At first, you might not even notice it. You just feel a little unseen, a little unimportant. But it adds up. You start censoring yourself, telling yourself not to bring things up because they have enough going on. You stop expecting them to check in, so you pretend you're fine even when you're not. And before you know it, you're carrying the weight of keeping the relationship alive while they coast on your emotional labor. That kind of dynamic chips away at your sense of worth, not because you don't have value, but because the person across from you isn't treating your presence like it matters. This isn't about blaming the other person or turning every relationship into a scoreboard. It's about paying attention, not to what they say, but to what they show. Conversation should be a two-way exchange. There should be room for both people's voices, needs, and feelings. When that balance is missing, it's not just disappointing, it's telling. Because when someone values you, they don't wait to be asked. They show up. They listen without rushing you. They follow up on things you said weeks ago because they actually heard you. That's care. That's presence. And when it's there, you feel it. So if you're always the one reaching out, always the one trying to repair, always the one keeping the dialogue going, take a step back. Ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped? Not to play games, but to get honest about what's real, because effort reveals intention. And if your silence is met with silence, if your pause is met with distance, that tells you what words won't. You deserve more than surface level responses and half-hearted replies. You deserve reciprocity, consistency, care that flows both ways. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for something mutual, and the right people won't make you beg for it. They'll meet you there because they want, not because you had to keep asking. At some point in your life, you have to stop asking people to give you what they've already shown they won't, not because you're bitter, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've finally realized your peace is too expensive to keep bargaining with people who don't value it. You've spent too much of your energy explaining, justifying, tiptoeing, and over-functioning. You've tried to be the calm one, the understanding one, the one who sees both sides. And in the process, you've taught people how to treat you by staying silent when you should have spoken, by staying when you should have walked, and by shrinking yourself just to make a relationship feel balanced. But here's what you've probably started to notice. Clarity is what sets you free. It's not the loud moments that break us. It's the quiet patterns, the consistent dismissals, the conversations that never turn into change, the apologies that sound good but don't mean much, the way you always feel like the emotional adult in the room. That kind of emotional labor is exhausting, and you can't heal while still standing in the fire that keeps burning you. You've been taught that love means staying. That kindness means self-sacrifice. That strength is measured by how much you can take. But I want to offer you a different way. What if love also meant boundaries? What if kindness included yourself? And what if real strength looked like calm, clear choices instead of silent endurance? You see, calm doesn't mean powerless. It doesn't mean passive. It means you're not giving your energy to arguments that go nowhere. It means you're no longer explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand you. It means you've stopped handing out unlimited access to people who only show up when it's convenient for them. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Boundaries aren't about building walls to push people out. They're about building clarity to keep your peace in. They say, here's what I can offer. Here's what I can't. And here's how I need to be treated if we're going to keep showing up for each other. And when someone truly cares, they don't resist your boundary. They respect it. They adjust, not because you force them to, but because they see your worth clearly and they want to protect it, not test it. And yet not everyone will respond that way. Some will take your boundary as an insult. They'll call you cold, selfish, distant, not because you are, but because they benefited from your lack of boundaries for so long. Don't let that noise confuse you. People committed to misunderstanding you will always find a way to twist your truth. You don't need to defend yourself to them. Their resistance isn't about you. It's about the control they're losing. Let me say this gently but firmly. It's not your job to teach grown people how to treat others with respect. You can model it. You can communicate clearly. But the moment someone shows you they're unwilling to meet you in mutual care, you have to believe them. You can't build a future with someone who refuses to grow in the present. You also can't heal in the same space that keeps wounding you. That means you might have to leave places that once felt like home, even if it's lonely at first. But loneliness with peace is still better than company with chaos. Healing requires safety. And that safety isn't just about the absence of shouting. It's about the presence of consistency, of emotional attunement, of relational honesty. And maybe the most painful realization of all, when the conversation feels one-sided, it's not an accident, it's a pattern. You weren't just unlucky. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't too much. You were simply trying to connect with someone who didn't know how or didn't want. To meet you in the middle, that doesn't mean you failed. It means you outgrew something that wasn't growing with you. So what do you do now? You choose better. You stop negotiating with dysfunction. You stop trying to win love through exhaustion. You stop abandoning yourself in hopes that someone else will finally see you. And you start returning quietly, steadily to who you were before the confusion, before the gaslighting, before the guilt tripping, before the slow erosion of your self-trust. You start listening to your body when it tenses around certain people. You start paying attention to how you feel after conversations, not just during them. You stop making excuses for people's lack of effort and start holding them to the same standard of emotional presence you hold yourself to. You begin to trust that your clarity is not too much. It's what keeps you safe. And most of all, you stop letting people stay in your life out of history, habit, or fear. You start choosing based on alignment, not potential, not performance, but on the steady, quiet presence of mutual respect. You deserve to be in relationships where you don't have to explain your worth, where your boundaries are understood, not resented, where your calm is seen as strength, not a surrender, where the conversations go both ways, where love isn't heavy, it's safe. So if you're feeling tired, if you've been carrying more than your share just to keep the peace, let this be your reminder. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to reset. You're allowed to choose how you show up and who you show up for. And that doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It makes you whole. It makes you strong in the kind of way that doesn't need to shout. You are not too much. You are not asking for too much. You are not difficult to love. You are simply learning to stop settling for less. And that is the beginning of everything real.